Good day, everyone. My name is Akpomiemie Erujaro. I'm an artist, as you might have guessed. It's a pleasure to have you here today. If this is your first time of visiting, if you're returning, even greater. A fantastic pleasure to have you here today. Today it's going to be a bit different. Today we do a bit of a mixture of history and culture, and history, culture, and art. I would like to present to you this piece of painting, one of my favorite. That seems to be a cliche. One of my favorites. All my works are my favorites. Anyway, this is one of those that stand out. It's uh, part of my bookshelf series. Anyway, the reason behind this work is actually because of this colorful painting here. This is a work I did quite a while back, and I did a presentation on her, and my daughter got me talking. So somebody noticed this painting in the background, and asked me, "What is that about?" Sometimes I was presenting one image, but somebody else was looking at something else. Anyway, this fella, he said, "Are you not painting libraries?" That actually gave me the idea. I said, "No, I'm not painting libraries. This is just a collection of books that I've read over the years, and the books that actually help to it gives you an insight into my perspective on things, how I see things, and how some of these things influence my outlook on life." And I just thought maybe I will share it with you, and some of the many of them are maybe books you might have read, or you know uh, you might have just heard of. Whatever way, please by all means, please consider looking into them and share with your friends. Anyway, before we come into this one, let me just do a bit of a recap on this lady who went by the name of Quintier, Tiye, or Quintai. Some people just say Quinty. Now, this lady, she was the queen of Kemet. She was born in 1398 BC, and she was one of the most remarkable ladies to have come out of Kemet, but by no means the greatest. I mean, we have great queens like Hatshepsut, even from Ethiopia, like Queen Candace. So, but this lady, she's one of those that her influence is worth is quite notable, especially when you consider how long ago we're talking about here, 1398. That's quite a while ago, and the effect she's had in the history of that time, which has reverberations even till today. And there are two remarkable leaders of Kemet that are quite connected to her. That's one of the things that makes her a lady of remarkable standing in history. She was married to King Amenhotep III. Her husband, unfortunately, did not live that long, and when her husband passed on, she then took reigns of Kemet, and that was because her son was too young to take over the leadership. So she ruled in her own stead for quite a long time. So if we look, because she was not just your conventional queen that stayed in the palace and enjoyed the good life. No, she was actually involved in the reign of the kingdom with her husband. And the time in which she ruled with her husband and in her own stead before handing over to her son was altogether about 40, 50 years. So in that space of time, there was great uh, um, great accomplishments in Kemet, be it trade, harmony, growth. It was quite a fantastic time. 50 years is no small uh, duration when you talk about rulership of a kingdom such as Kemet at the time. Anyway, when her son came of age, the son was Akhenaten. Now, Akhenaten again too, was one of those kings of Kemet that actually left his mark in shaping of societies as we know it today, specifically religion, because religion is what he was, spirituality I should say, because back then the people of Kemet, they were more spiritual people, not religious. I hope you get my drift when I say, because there's a vast difference between spirituality and religion. So when we talk about ancient Kemet, it's more about spirituality than religion. What her son Akhenaten did that was remarkable was that he was the one that gave us the concept of monotheism, the concept of oneness of God, supremacy of God. In Yoruba language, we say Ogenovo. It's that oneness of God that is universal, one might say today. It's all thanks to our son, Akhenaten. Now, after Akhenaten, we then come into a king that it's arguably the most famous kings to come out of Kemet, and that is King Tutankhamun, King Tut. Now, we say King Tutankhamun was arguably the most famous. That was because thanks to the British archaeologist Howard Carter, who in 1922, yes, 1922 discovered the unmolested tomb of Tutankhamun, where they found all the artifacts that prove that the story of the Egyptians was not just a myth. They saw all these artifacts in his tomb, which, thanks to providence, it was not molested by the tomb robbers that used to raid the graves and the temples of ancient Kemet. But his tomb was not molested. So Howard Carter presented this to the world, and again, that refocused the minds of the world to that section that great civilization was once here that lasted for thousands of years. So you see, with this beautiful lady, she spans, you see, 3 generations. Her husband, Amenhotep III, her son, Akhenaten, and her grandson. So that is the grandmother of King Tut. She wasn't just a pretty face, she was a lady of substance. So anyway, that is about this work. Now I did quite a detailed video on Queen Tai, so you can scroll down and look into my file, and you see there. Please, I think it's worth visiting. So that's Queen Tai. Now let's come to the subject of presentation today, which is this piece of work here. This is my labor of love. I love this piece. I did this back in 21. Unlike that work, this was done in oil. I like working with acrylics more. I kind of find the flexibility of acrylics. It suits me better. But this is done in oil. As you can see, it's quite sizable. It measures 80 by 127 centimeters. Now, if you look at this painting here, we see a young man. He's studying. Behind him is a collection of books. Like I said, these are some of the books I've read over the years, which I'm going to share with you today. These books are books that I found very, very enriching, very, very enlightening. There was a great American writer called Dr. Runoko Rashidi. He said history is a light that illuminates the past. It's also a key that unlocks the door into the future. So with that in mind, I invite you to come with me. Let's see if we can unravel that thought, lock it down. Now, we see the young man here, he's studying. These are some of the history books he's studying. And this is his study, his room. And there's a poster in the room, this painting here. And we can see that's the red London bus. That's the black cap of London. So evidently this is streets of London somewhere. There's a bit of a history to this painting itself. This whole painting within this painting. But for reasons of time, I won't want to go into that today. Maybe at a later time, I might refer to this painting and talk about it at length. But for now, just appreciate the vibrant colors of these streets of London. If I might just say, anyway, let me not go into this because I can just get. I say I wanted to get sucked into it. Anyway, this young man, we can say he's studying. The book is reading at the moment. We don't know the title of the book, but we can see the chapter is called, I don't think the camera can capture it, but you can take my word for it. The chapter is the Council of Nicaea 325 AD. Now, that date is a very, very important date. We can dedicate over an hour just to talk about that date, but we're not going to do that today. Let's talk about other things. But I'll invite you to please consider that date because now and again in the history of man, certain dates, certain things happen that greatly alter the course of history. And this date is a date that, one of those dates that did exactly that. This Council of Nicaea was a council called by King Constantine, Emperor of Rome. He called this conference in Nice, in 325 AD. This was a conference of theologians, great theologians of the empire at the time. They sat down and they gave us, I won't say because invented religion, says religion is invented, is a bit of a strong word, but they gave us religion as we know it today, especially, I'm talking here now of the Christian religion. The Christian religion, as it has come to develop today, into what it is. Because when I say the Christian religion now, we're talking about the the Holy Roman Catholic Church. Now, we must bear in mind, because many times I hear Africans say, "Oh, Christianity is a white man's religion." No. That is one of those great misconceptions that people had. Christianity was not a white man's religion, never was. Maybe now they've taken it over, predominantly the Roman Catholic Church and many of other variations, but it was never. Before this council, Christianity started with, when I will call it the Coptic Egyptians now, because it was then Egypt, now it became Egypt, the Coptic, and then it moved. The church was well established in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, you had the church, the Christian church. Before even we had the Vatican, we had the Hagia Sophia. Hagia Sophia that later became a mosque and then back a church, and now it's a museum. Today, the Turkish government play all kinds of game with the Hagia Sophia. Not many people even know the history behind the Hagia Sophia. So these are some of the things we should bear in mind. And the reason I'll say that certain things happen that change the course of history, this conference basically called by Constantine was, he wanted to, I'm not going to go too detail into this now, but basically he wanted to organize the society to be a bit more, wanted to calm the people really. There was so much confusion in terms of religious practices and people's conduct. So he wanted to bring all this together, and that was why this conference was called. Now, I believe some people think, oh, this conference was, some people say this was when, and agree that when things started, we want to trace when things started going wrong, you can trace it back to this. There were a few other conferences as well, but this was the most notable, the Conference of Nicaea. And the reason I said sometimes certain things happen that does alter the course of history, because even I don't believe the Emperor Constantine at the time could have ever imagined that what he was doing with this conference was going to have such a prolonged effect and affect changed the course of history, the whole world as we know it today. Remember, his intention was about his empire, how to organize Rome properly. That was why he called this conference. But from then now, things moved on, and it had greatly affected the way things are in the world. So, like I said, maybe sometime we do another lecture about this conference and the effect that's having on the world. But I urge you, invite you to please look into it if it is something you would like to consider. So let us dive into the other works now. Because I started with my beautiful lady here, Queen Ti, it's only logical to go back to Kemet, starting point. So there's a book here called the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now, this is one of those fantastic books. If you want to understand many religious concepts, this is one of the oldest spiritual book ever. It's in the same category as the coffin text, the pyramid text, or the first books about spirituality. This is a fantastic read. The reason I bought this book, I have to say, is I wanted to see with my own eyes the 42 declaration of innocence. Some people call it negative confession, but I don't see what is negative about it. I prefer the Declaration of Innocence, the 42 Declaration of Innocence. If you are of the Abrahamic faith, that is Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, I'm sure you know of the 10 Commandments. Now, before anybody called Moses ever walked this earth and went up the mountain to have a cozy one-to-one chat with God, and God gave him the 10 Commandments, I urge you to please consider looking into this book, and then you see with your own eyes that the 10 Commandments Moses supposedly got from God was in use in ancient Kemet for thousands of years before even Abraham was born. So that is if, of course, if any such people as Abraham or even Moses ever walked this earth like you and I. But anyway, that's a different topic. Let's not go into that. But those 42 declaration of innocence, you can see if that is from where we got the 10 Commandments. So amongst other major spiritual issues, please consider this book. It is worth looking into. Anyway, still on the spiritual theme, there is a book here called Ancient Egypt, the Light of the World. I got it here somewhere. You know, that's it. Ancient Egypt, the Light of the World. This is by Gerard Mercy. Gerard Mercy, this book is quite a voluminous because you can see it comes in 2 volumes. So this is 2 in 1. This is one of those great books that tells you a lot about the many of our religious practices we do today, where we got them from. You see, many of all these practices you can trace them. Robert Mercy, he was an Englishman that did quite extensive research into religiosity and got to the bottom of how most of all these things came about, things that we do today. I mean, I cannot recommend this book highly enough, because again, too, it is not only about issues of religion, because many things we do today we take for granted. Some of them, they started for spiritual reasons, but they then evolved to become cultural. Typical example would be the practice of male genital circumcision. Now, the circumcision is something that was practiced all over Africa since the beginning. Again, too, this was practiced for thousands of years, even before. So for we Africans, circumcision has nothing to do with the Arabs, has nothing to do with God saying to Abraham that it has been in practice for years and years and years, since millennia before anybody called Abraham came along. There's the Egyptian American historian. It's called Ashakwezi. Ashakwezi done. I haven't got any of his work here, but Ashakwezi also looked into this thing, and Ashakwezi shows you, takes you to sites in Egypt today where we see carvings on the walls of the circumcision being practiced even in ancient times. So around the world now, many people practice circumcision, but they don't even show. Like I must say, I must own up that until I read this book, I always assumed that circumcision came from the from the Arabs. They introduced it to us, but that is not the case. It's something that we've been doing long before then. Anyway, so that is by the by, and another book that I would like to introduce you to. Sorry, something just dropped there. On that book, I would like to introduce you to. It's still on that religious theme. It's this book called The Quest for the Historical Jesus. Again, too, before the somebody once said to me, I read somewhere, I believe, that if you want to avoid unnecessary arguments, unnecessary quarrels, don't have enemies. Two things you shouldn't talk about too much is religion or politics. This is a good case in point. This book was written by Herbert Schweitzer. Herbert Schweitzer was he was a German man. He actually a Nobel Prize winner, actually, and he wrote extensively. And one of the books he wrote is this book, where he researched the Christ figure. Was he a man that walked this earth like you or I, or was he a mythological figure? Again, too, I invite you to look into this bit and explore for yourself. Make up your own mind what you make of it. But it is, again, it's like the book by Gerard Messi. Is quite voluminous, but it is well written. I urge you to please read the book. Now you will notice that I've been talking now from moving from Kemet to Egypt. That is for a reason, and I want you to bear that in mind, that if you want to understand the history of this region properly, we have to separate it. Once upon a time, it was Kemet before it became Egypt. It did not become Egypt until the Greeks came in 332 BC. Yes, until that is when they changed it from Kemet to Greece. So if we want to understand this thing properly, it is best if we address it what the people used to call it then, which was Kemet. So one historian that did a lot of work in bringing to us our knowledge what was happening back then is none other than Dr. Joseph Ben Johannedan. He was more known as Dr. Ben. He wrote The Black Man of the Nile. I think I got it somewhere. The Black Man of the Nile and His Family. Yeah, that's the book there, by Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben, it's, oh my goodness, if you can see, that is Dr. Ben there. Dr. Ben was quite a firebrand. My goodness, this man was tough. Dr. Ben, he's long gone from this world now. He was Ethiopian, Puerto Rican descent. But I think he really came into his own in America. What made Dr. Ben remarkable was that Dr. Ben was not just a classroom scholar. He was an archaeologist that actually went into the field and got himself involved in physical digging of sites. So he was known for that. And because when Dr. Ben was around back in the 30s and 40s, archaeology was exclusively the preserve of Europeans. Europeans like Howard Carter that discovered King Tutankhamun's tomb. They were the only ones. I mean, the Africans were effectively barred from anything to do with archaeology. But Dr. Ben was one of those that would not take no for an answer. So he went and got himself stuck. I mean, he did lots of, and he Dr. Ben was a plain talker, you know. Sometimes when you listen to his choice of voice, you know, he was like an angry. Dr. Ben is like an angry scholar, you know, has no time to waste. So he just fantastic man. He wrote lots of books on this subject, but this is one of his greatest books, I think anyway. Yeah, but any book by Dr. Ben is worth reading. Dr. Ben he was a fantastic historian. Dr. Ben has gone now, and today we have lots of people that Dr. Ben mentored and went on to do great, fantastic works. Dr. Rinoko Rashidi, I mentioned earlier on, was one of Dr. Ben's prodigies, and one of them phenomenal chap is Anthony Browder. Anthony Browder, fantastic man. He wrote the Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization. Anthony Browder, again, some of these people, they are so dedicated actually. Dr. Browder seems to have dedicated his life to ancient Kemet, to bring ancient Kemet to life. He's written extensively as well. But if you want to just start one of his books, this is a fantastic read, Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization. Dr. Browder tells you a lot about what the ancient Kemetians have done to enrich our world today, be it even the United States. Dr. Browder points out the incredible feats of people like Benjamin Barnacle, the chap that helped to give us the layout of Washington D.C. today, and lots of symbols in America you might take for granted, be it the American dollar that has the pyramid, the Eye of Horus, the Lincoln, or is it Washington Memorial. I mean, you know, Anthony Browder does lots of work in that regard, and I urge you to look into the works of Anthony Browder. I was saying earlier on that Browder is a man that I believe rightfully earned the crown of Dr. Ben. The reason I say that is because, like Dr. Ben, Browder is not just a classroom teacher. He goes out to the field. As a matter of fact, at the moment, Browder is involved in an archaeological dig in Egypt. This archaeological, he did not discover it like Howard Carter. No, he took over the dig from the previous archaeologists that were working on it before, and he has, I think, they've been on this dig now for over 15 years. I think it's like kind of such a long time anyway, but he's dedicated his life to this dig, you know, and is digging the tomb of a great priest of Kemet of the past, a priest of great renown by the name of Karakamen. And apart from the tomb of Karakamen, Browder said they've also uncovered about 40 other temples in that area. So quite incredible man. He gave a press conference from a while back now, and he promised that by November this year, 2025, that he's going to present his findings to the world. So, fingers crossed, we should be expecting another moment like the Howard Carter's surprise. Anthony Browder promised to give the world a great piece once it's completed in November. So look out for that date. Now, you cannot mention Anthony Browder really without considering, I will jump in now, without considering Hazer Hilliard, Hazer G. Hilliard III. Now, Hazer Hilliard was a man that Tony Browder had in such high regard, and he actually, this is dig is doing in Egypt at the moment, he actually named it in honor of Hilliard. One thing about this book by Hilliard is called The Reawakening of the African Mind. We are told not to judge a book by the cover, but I must admit that this is one book I bought because of the title, Reawakening of the African Mind, and I never regretted buying that book. And because it's such a rich book. I mean, when an archaeologist, historian, and a psychologist writes a book, you know you're reading something serious, you know. So he's written extensively as well, but this is one of his finest, I think, anyway. I love this book. I think we really have to try to reawaken that African mind, that same mind that gave us the pyramids, that same mind that was able to analyze the universe. I mean, these people gave the ancient Kemetans, they gave us astronomy, astrology, geometry. I mean, there is something there, you know. We have to try to, as Africans, we have to try to reawaken that magic, that thing that is buried within us, that has gone to sleep. That is the cry of people like Hilliard over the years, saying we should please try to get it back. And I cannot I cannot speak. I mean, it's fantastic. Anything by Hilliard is worth reading. In between these two gentlemen, there's Rinoko Rashidi. Rinoko Rashidi, he gave us My Global Journeys in Search of the African Presence. It's not here. It's quite a voluminous book again. What this fantastic writer did, he went around the world, basically to every country in the world really. His mission was to find black people wherever he could. He went in search of black people. He go to places you not even imagine, you know. Be it Saudi Arabia, be it in Malaysia, Philippines, or sort of anywhere. He will go and uncover black people in these places. I mean, he was just he focused on unstoppable man, you know, and he really comes with some very, very great stories. I mean, it was true Luko Rashidi for the first time that because his books always comes with photographs where he put all these things, you know. It was through him that I knew that the black people in this world, melanated people, dark skin like me, that has got blonde hair. I'm not talking of mixed race now. Black skin people with blonde hair. I mean, it's incredible. He finds these people all out because he doesn't just go to the big libraries. He goes to the libraries and museums that are off the usual tourist track. And sometimes he gets access to people that have got extensive private collections, that he goes to their libraries and sometimes he sees the artifacts, photographs them, and put them in his books, or take pictures. One beautiful picture I saw in one of this work is also is the picture of Maurice. Now, who would have thought that the patron saint once upon a time of Germany was a black man, Maurice, and came to that knowledge thanks to Rinoko Rashidi. Yes, a black man was the patron saint of Germany. Now that would have given Hitler something to think about. Now, that is not really big deal, really. An African, Nigerian being the patron saint of Germany. After all, in ancient times, we've had not one or two, three emperors of the great Roman Empire. The most famous being what's his name again? The most famous being September Saviors. He was actually often referred to as the African emperor, the Roman African emperor. He ruled from 193 to 222 AD. Yeah, to to 222 AD. Yeah, that was how long he ruled for. September 7th. You look into it. It's one of those important facts of ancient times. I mean, it's hard to believe that once upon a time, this world was not as nasty as it is now. There was once upon a time where people were not judged and persecuted just based on their skin color, but everybody was judged by the character of the individual and not his place of birth or his skin color. How pathetic that is. I think Martin Luther King Jr. put it in a more clever way anyway, about this, about color and race, character. Anyway, so that is what we're looking into. We'll look at Rashidi's works. When I talk about this greatness of African past, it is sometimes you might wonder what happened there, and that will bring me steadily now to the book called The Destruction of African Civilization by Chancellor Williams. Sometimes when you talk about African civilization, some people even Africans find it difficult to get their head around it. African civilization, what's that about? We don't know this. I mean, Africans, from the beginning of time, we've been integral to the history of the world. Life started in Africa. I mean, Africa, we made history. But for some odd reason, some people decide to kind of manipulate, distort these facts. It's incredible. And if you want to get into this theme properly, no better book. I think it has to be a must-have. I mean, if you're interested in world history, African history, put this in your library. Let your children read this book. It's called The Destruction of African Civilization by Chancellor Williams. Now, Chancellor Williams is somebody that I think you just have to give this man credit, if not for anything, for his tenacity. Chancellor Williams dedicated 16 years of his life to giving us this book. I mean, that's what you call dedication. 16 years just to give us one book. And he could have even gone further in his works, as we said, but because he was aging, his eyesight was going glaucoma, and then he had to stop. But in that 16 years, he was able to compress so much into this wonderful piece. And for this, I must give thanks to the Americans, the American government, that is. Kudos to them. They did fantastically in assisting Chancellor Williams, because Chancellor Williams, he visited every country in Africa, and in every country he went to, the American embassy in those countries provided him with logical assistance such as transport and everything. So he was able to go really deep into the interiors of these countries to do his research. And from there, he gave us this fantastic book. Now, just briefly, Chancellor Williams, he started the civilization bit from Kemet. Now, Kemet back then basically was the center of gravity. I mean, all people from different parts of the continent, they gravitated towards the Nile corridor. When we talk of Egypt, sometimes we think of Egypt as the beginning and the end of the River Nile. No, the River Nile runs. I think is it not Uganda or Kenya? 44,000 miles into the body of Africa. And in ancient times, because of the proximity of water, vegetation, most civilization always goes by the wherever there's long rivers. So like the River Congo, River Nile, River Niger, all those rivers, you see great civilization around there. But the greatest of all those civilizations was the one of Kemet, where it all started. They give us all these fantastic things. And that's not to say there were not other civilizations. There were other civilizations there. But what made the ones of the Egyptians stand out is because they were very meticulous in recording their history, and because it was done in stone, it was for prosperity. So it's there even to the carving. Other civilizations that were around, if they recorded their history, they've been lost to the dust of time. They've crumbled. We don't know. But the one of Kemet, because it is in stone, you can still see them today. I mean, when you look at other civilizations around the world, sometimes they will say, "Oh, we believe this is the place that this was buried. This is the wall, remains of the wall. We believe this. We believe that." No, with ancient Kemet, it is not we believe. We know because it is there. It is written in black and white. You can see the carvings. They're still there, and that's what the Egyptians did. So this book tells you when how this place was well developed, well advanced, and then when the Arabs and the Europeans started coming, the invasion started coming gradually, and everything started falling apart. Of this coming, for example, look at when the Greeks came in 332 BC. The Greeks, this is coming off Alexandria. I mean, it was such a fantastic place that Alexander the Great actually decided he never went back to Greece. He turned his base into, it made Kemet his base, hence the name Alexander. Anyway, so with the coming of the Arabs and the Europeans, you see the Africans started to spread, and they then moved to all different parts of the African continent. And this movement of the Africans that spread out over time, over the centuries, we can see that that is one of the reasons why today no one single African country can claim ownership to Kemet. Nobody can. I mean, not even the if it came to countries, the Sudanese or the Libyans that border Kemet today. So no one country can say, "Oh, it's our country." No. So this book, it's a great read. You read this book. There's an American teacher by the name of Philippe Matthews. Philippe Matthews posed this question. He said that people always say, "What is wrong with the African? What's wrong with the African?" He said, "No." He rephrased that rhetorically. He said the question we should ask is, what happened to the African? Now, if you want to know what happened to the African, please look into the works of Chancellor Williams, because he gives you a breakdown of what happened to the African and the consequences of it today. Another great writer who is mentioned here, when I talk about the destruction of Africa, I would like to quickly just jump back here. There's a book here called The Stolen Legacy by J.M. James. It's not here. Anyway, it's quite you can see it from this painting here. It's quite a size, quite a big book, but really it's not really this big, but it had such an impression on me, that I my artistic concept, and I made this big, but it is not that big at all. It's maybe a book about this size, not that big. Paperback that is anyway. And through this book, you can see many of these our stolen. Basically, what many of the things we think today are great philosophies, architecture, inventions of the Greeks or the Romans. No such things. The Greeks. I mean, when Alexander got to Kemet, like I said, he was mightily impressed. We see in his records, one of the letters he wrote to his mother, he said, he has found the land from where the gods, not the people now, the gods of the Greeks came from. Here he's talking about the Apollos, the Zeus, because when you look into the mythology of Kemet, even Zeus, that is, when you look into the Osirian drama, you always see all this connection there. So the ancient Greeks all the Herodotus of all the world, they paid homage to the Egyptians, the Kemetans. So Stone Legacy gives you a good breakdown of all, because he does a great deal of extensive work, research, to prove his point that many things we attribute to the Greeks is not so. These things were originally the people of Kemet, and he does this by quoting many times, quoting Europeans, quoting the Greeks themselves, that this is what the Greeks said. So again, to it's Stolen Legacy is a fantastic read. I highly recommend this book. If I might just jump on now, there's a book here by John Henry Clark, African People in World History. We'll go to John Henry Clark. John Henry Clark deserves more time, which I cannot do now. We'll go to John Henry Clark later on. There's a book here, another book here, The Black Genesis. And I just feel compelled to mention this fantastic gentleman, Robert Beauvoir. Robert Beauvoir, he wrote this book with Profi. Robert Beauvoir is one of those, again, too. He's like Rinoko, like Dr. Ben, like Astrakwesi. He does go to the field. He goes to show you most of all these things. And his books usually comes with photographs where he tells you a lot about his findings. So it's worth looking into about Beauvoir. May I just mention this book? This book, I got it in paperback. It is they came before Columbus. This was by Ivan Sedman. Ivan Sedman again to yes, I have to connect Ivan Sedman to this book actually, The Destruction of African Civilization. Ivan Sedman used to say, Africa is like an exploded star. An exploded, you know, when a star explodes, you find bits of it fly so far into the galaxies, everywhere. That was what Chancellor Williams proved to us, that the destruction of Africa, when Kemet exploded, so to speak, Africans were everywhere. And Ronoko Rashidi takes it further. This bit of Africa is what Ronoko Rashidi made it his life mission to go around the world to see as much as possible if he can trace these dotted fragments of Africa. And if you even consider today, lots of great musicians of the past, Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, I mean, they've been saying, wherever you are, so long you are black, you are African. You are part of that star that found its way to different corners of the earth. So we should never lose track of that. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. So this book is a great read. They came before Columbus by Ivan Sedman. He's from Guyana. But again, too, like Dr. Ben, he came into his own in America. The life in America seems to have awoken something deep in this our brothers of African descent, that they decide to go deep, you know. Ivan Sedman is one of those people. Ivan Sedman, we should just to mention here is that in this book, They Came Before Columbus, he talks a lot about because believe it or not, we had Africans there in the American land space before the Europeans even ever thought, all these Columbus people ever thought of even venturing into that part. So Ivan Sedman gives us a detailed analysis, historical facts of how this all came about. One thing I'd just like to mention in passing about Ivan Sedman, if you look at today, the history of science and all that, that's on that bit where Ivan Sedman already does a dig into African contribution to science, men, women, especially women, men, women, and all that. And like Rashidi, he also explored a great deal in Latin America, the Omex and all that, he does a great piece on them. So Ivan Sandman is a man that is worth looking at. I highly recommend his works. Now, I've been talking about this African history, how it was greatly distorted and all that, and why, I don't know. There is a book here I would like to draw to your attention. It's up here. It's called The Black Athena, by Martin Barnell. Martin Barnell, he's one of those, he came from a line of historians. I think his dad was also a renowned historian. And he gave us this book, Black Athena. What Martin Barnell did is he dug deep into this whole thing about distortion of history, African history, world history. And what Martin Barnell was able to do, because some of all this manipulation of history, although sometimes it is subtle, sometimes it is not intentional, because sometimes people do not even realize, but most times it is done intentionally. People sit down and try to distort history. And Martin Barnell zeroes this down to the Germans, where this was in the Gothenburg University in the mid 19th century, where we had these scholars. They're not silly people. These are great minds, intellectuals. These people in Germany at the time, Gothenburg University, because they did it under the pretense that they're trying to present the history of classical Greece. And there is where they systematically manipulated, distorted, misrepresented the history of Greece, and sometimes made outright fabrications, and took out or reduced tremendously the contribution of Africa. I mean, without Africa, there is no Greece. There is no Greece. I mean, Dr. Henry Clark used to make a joke that at the time, Africa was on the Egyptians had done all the greatest we know of Egypt today. The European was not then living in a house that had a window. I mean, it is incredible. So Martin Barnell really goes deep into this manipulation of the story of history, and because you have to bear in mind that we had the printing press. So with the coming of the printing press, you can see how all this all happened. And this distortion that went back to this long time ago, back in the mid 19th century, it goes on even to today. I will show you a work. It's not listed here, but I'll say it's all done to mislead people. I've got a book here. If you can see the book now, this is called The Treasures of the Egyptian Museum. This is a book that was commissioned and published by the Egyptian Museum. So this is not any just any jokers. This is a book by the establishment. Now look at this, for example. I mean, it makes you just laugh, This is the book of the treasures of, because if you want to see lots of these things about Kemet, you have to go to Egypt. They have the greatest amount of, because even though so much was taken out from Egypt over the years, they still have the greatest collection of their works still there. So this is an introduction to it. Look at this, I find it so funny. Look at the ancient people, the founders of the civilization. But to present it to you now, we have this woman here, this European here, that could have come out of somewhere in the from the depth of Sweden. A European lady. I mean, this lady, if she goes to Egypt today without a gallon of sunscreen, she will not last 2 weeks because skin cancer is serious business. Anyway, so when you look at it now, you see now this is how it is presented. You know, so the original people in the background, the Greco-Roman period people, you put them in the front as the founders. You know, when people talk of Egypt today, they think of Cleopatra. Cleopatra came with the Ptolemies, and at the time of the Ptolemies, we know everything of substance in Egypt was already done. But that's why I think it's good to tell your history, because there is this writer here, I didn't get to go into his work, Peter Ike. He wrote the social exchange theory. He used to say, if you don't write your own history, somebody else will. And if they do, you will not like it. So we have a responsibility. That's why I talk to all these great writers that are trying to tell us this history. And if you look at this book, for example, now, let me just get back into it now. It has lots of, that's King Tut, you know, King Tut is all the African figures. It had lots of images, lots of pictures of great people gone and past. But when they present all this work, I want to show you a particular work now. They present it to distort the image of the original people of Kemet. So you are looking at it, but sometimes you might be easily deceived by what you are looking at. You think you are looking at the works of the Europeans, but no, it is not the work of the Europeans, it is the Africans. The Europeans came later on, and they're giving all these credits to the Europeans, and by so doing, actively trying to mislead and hoodwink people. Now we look at this, for example. You're giving us this as the face of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. Yeah. Now, and this is now, not many people know who this is, but that's King Zoser. This is King Zoser, for whom the step pyramids was built by Himhotep, the great mortal genius. Now he's hidden inside, and we have this Swedish, Finnish-looking woman in the cover of the book. But if you look at King Zoser here, his nose has been knocked off, but you can still see this is the features of an African. You can see this is the full lips and all that. I mean, at least we still have his lips here to tell. But if you look at something like the world's greatest sculpture, Haramaketi, which is more known as the Sphinx today, the nose and the lips are knocked out, but you can still tell the Sphinx is an African. I don't like calling the Sphinx, you know. I mean, because it's like like I said, when these Greeks come, the Europeans come, they just at will, they can change the name of any place they like, you know. Many countries in Africa, thank God, they changed their names back now, you know. One of the most notable, Ghana and Burkina Faso today. Anyway, they changed the names of all these places, and that's how Haramaketi was changed to the Sphinx. Now, why that name troubles me a lot is because if you look at them, when you call Haramaketi the Sphinx, that is as offensive as calling Jesus Christ a monster, a demonic monster, because that's what the Sphinx is. The Sphinx was a demonic monster in ancient Greek mythology. Now the Greeks came and then they just decided to change that name because they thought he looks like that monster in their mythology. If you want to bother a bit, because the Sphinx, it's like I said, it is part of, it was part of rich Greek mythology. I mean, it was from this whole concept of the Sphinx that Sigmund Freud got his the whole story, the whole Oedipus Rex syndrome, that love for mom, obsessive sexual love for mom, and hatred for the father figure. Can't seem to get my head around it, but it is from there you know Sigmund Freud, I believe, got his thing and then started doing his psychoanalysis. Today, when the African American in particular is truly vexed, he uses a phrase in that vein. Anyway, let's not get into that. But just thought I would just point out to you this distortion, how it is done. And this book I showed you just now of being put out by the Egyptian Museum, it is not only the Egyptians that do that now. All around the world, the Louvre in Paris, even the British Museum. I'll tell you a story about the British Museum. A few years ago, I took my daughter, when my daughter was still very young. She was about 10, 11 at the time. I took her to the British Museum. Because when my daughter was young, one way I used to educate my daughter in a fun way was I get her the map of the world, and I would say, my darling, I'll point out a country, she has to tell me the capital of that country. That's how a game we used to play to educate her as well. So on a good day, my daughter can tell you basically the capital of any country in the world. So she can say, oh, this is Tripoli, this is Paris, this is Washington, D.C., this is Accra, this is Ouagadougou, Tripoli, like that. So anyway, I took her to the British Museum, and because we go to the British Museum today, the centerpiece of the British Museum at all times is the Egyptian collection, starting from the Rosetta Stone. So I took her and so I showed her all the sculptures, carvings, the ones that I can understand, explained to her and all that. And I said, okay, madam, let us go to the African section. So she was startled. African section, is this not... Now you listen closely now. Is it not? He said, Daddy, is Egypt not in Africa? I said, yes, yeah, Egypt is in Africa. So why are we going downstairs? It's not here. I said, no, madam, it's downstairs. Because if you go to the British Museum today, the collections of Egypt, they are on one level, big massive area, where the artifacts are put alongside Mesopotamia and all that Middle East area. To go to the African section, you have to go downstairs on the ground, down to the basement. So just a small section to see. So you see, there's a deliberate attempt now here to separate Egypt from the physical body of Africa. I mean, a child, people under 10 years old, even a child. Sometimes people say, oh, it doesn't really matter. If it doesn't really matter, I always wonder, why go into all that trouble trying to mislead, to hoodwink the people? I mean, there's an American lady always, she's been crying since the 60s now, Jane Elliott. She's a European American, and she says all the time, when you try to manipulate history, thinking you're doing to the detriment of the Africans, you are also misleading your own people. So why mislead the whole world with all this kind of mindless foolishness of trying to rewrite or manipulate history? I mean, when you go to the African section, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's really nothing of great significance. The only thing of significance in the African section of the British Museum, if you go there today, are the looted Benin bronze that the British took after they destroyed the Benin Empire back in when was the exact date the British destroyed the British Empire, Benin Empire? That was in 1897. Yes, 1897, when mindless destruction. So they destroyed the empire from the palace of the king. That's the equivalent of looting Washington, the White House or Downing Street or Buckingham Palace, whatever. So they looted the palace of the king, called an Oba, and brought some of his art, because many of them is distributed and sold all over Europe. But the majority of them are still in the British Museum. So that is what is presented the British Museum as the greatest thing to come out of Africa. Now, let's not get it wrong. The Benin Empire was a great empire. We must not forget that. It vast empire. I mean, the city walls of Benin, capital, the wall it had, because all destroyed by the British now, it had the greatest man-made structure, the Benin Wall, about 4,000 miles. Is believed to be longer than the Great Wall of China. The British destroyed it. And the palace of the Oba, the capital city, was destroyed as well. So it is these looted artifacts that the British took from the destruction of that place that they now put in the British Museum as the greatest in the continent of Africa. When you go to the British Library, the African section, apart from these artifacts from Benin, other things you see there is just wood, pot, clays, pots of, I mean, come on. But the greatest thing to come out of African continent, which is the collection from Egypt, is separated from the body of Africa. Anyway, let's leave that to one side. It's all too depressing stuff. A book I would like to bring to your attention up here. Let's go a bit up now. The Shadow of the 3rd Century is also great. You tie that with this book, Quest for Historical Jesus or Ancient Egypt Light of the World. That is a spiritual book with Professor Kaba's Spirituality Before Religion, Egyptian Book of the Day. Up here, there's a fantastic book, a must read. This is called The Iceman Inheritance by Michael Bradley. Great researcher. Michael Bradley, I think, is Canadian. He wrote this book. What Michael Bradley was trying to do with his writing, that book, he was trying to get into that psyche of the human mind, wondering, what is it about the human nature? Some human beings, I should emphasize, some, that have that need, that urge of death and destruction. Wherever they go with death, and it comes naturally to them with death and destruction, to destroy, to kill, genocide. What is it about this kind of people? That was what Michael Bradley was trying to get. I mean, in recent times, we saw what the Germans did to the Jews. 6 million people. I mean, But even before the Germans even did that to the Jews, they were in Africa, in Namibia. The Herero people. I mean, the Germans just went there. Because you have to understand that, I mean, the Germans went there with a battalion of soldiers, arms and ammunition, just to kill everybody they can get their hands on. Even children, babies. Slaughter. So it's a kind of, after the Germans did that to the people of Herero in Namibia, the Jews were just the next guys, next victims in their purview. Just, And it makes you wonder, what is it about these people? What is it about these people? I don't like talking too much about the slave trade, because anyway, I'll talk about that maybe later. But when you consider that millions of people, the figure will not even certain now, that went through that atrocious transatlantic slave trade. I'm not talking of those that made it to America, because those that made it to America, those, kudos to them. Those that were not able to survive that journey, that died along the way, because more people actually died than those that made it. Can you just imagine that? That's mindset. And if you think about survive that kind of death and destruction. Before the Europeans got to the American land space, not 5, not 50, they had 500 different nations in that space. The Europeans, an orgy of death and destruction, just slaughter, killed and killed and killed and killed and killed and killed. 500 nations. 500 nations. The same thing they did in Australia. The same. I mean, it's Michael Bradley said, what is this? What is it about? What is that thing? He tries to get into that mindset of death and destruction that these people seems to carry. And again, these things we should not take it for granted that it's over in time of the past. No. In I mentioned the Jews earlier on. Leopold of Belgium, what he did to the Congo was more or less nearly double what happened to the Jews. There he took out about 10 to 12 million people over a short space of time. And I'm not even going to say Leopold because Leopold never visited. He never left Germany. He never left Belgium for Congo that he just destroyed the people with reckless disregard. But you have to understand that, like what the Germans did in Namibia, a battalion, or what the British did to the Benin Empire, a battalion was sent from Europe, go there, kill and destroy, kill, destroy, kill, destroy, wipe out. That was what happened in Belgium. So if you went for say Leopold, when you singling out one man, he was just the arrowhead. Behind him there was a battalion of people that carried out these orders, killing people, men, women, children. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. And like I say, that mindset has not really changed. What is happening can still happen today. I mean, today you have so-called great powers of the world, superpowers. What makes them superpower is not because they are able or willing to eradicate poverty and misery in their own land. No, a superpower basically means I am capable to export death and destruction on wholesale scale to wipe out anybody I want to wipe out in this world. I can do that to anybody. That is what's been a superpower is really. I mean, even in Africa, that was what the apartheid government of South Africa had. We all knew it was open secret that the government of South Africa back then, the apartheid government, had a nuclear bomb. That was what they used to intimidate the rest of Africa. Now, if you guys want to come on us, we got the capability to wipe. That is what the Americans did to the Japanese in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We can do that to any part of the African continent. So you better stay back. That's what the European South Africans used to intimidate. Credit to Mandela. His work is not here, but yeah, it's in volume 2. During the negotiations of the transition to democracy in South Africa, after the negotiations, that the big powers insisted that Mandela and the ANC must give up the nuclear bomb of South Africa. And I love Mandela. One thing Mandela said that why not? He will give it up in a heartbeat. That he could not conceive how on earth he can drop, for any reason, want to drop a nuclear bomb on any African in the continent or anyone else in the world. So yeah, by all means, take away your nuclear bomb. I don't need a nuclear bomb. And that's so today we still have all these people, superpowers, great powers, So what these terrible people of the past did, death and destruction, it can still happen today. So we must never. Bob Marley say, I have no fear of atomic energy, but I love Bob Marley, but I must say I have fear for those guys because it only takes a madman to to set everything on fire. Anyway, so Michael Bradley deals with this thing thoroughly. It's worth reading. The Iceman Inheritance. It's a great read. If you want to read this Michael Bradley's book, please, it's good to read alongside this book. This is the ISIS Papers by Dr. Frances Cressy Weston. She's this lady. My goodness, she's great. She's like she's a bit like Hazel Healer, a psychologist and a writer. So she also does a great in-depth study into this psyche of certain parts of human beings to want to kill people, you know. And again, too, it is incredible. I was talking about what the what they call them, what the Germans did to the people of Namibia, but this is, don't think this is, or what the Americans did to the Japanese. This is not something that happens only outside Europe. It can even happen in Europe. Although the one of Germany Holocaust, that is recent, but in ancient times in Europe, not many people might know this. There was once a kingdom called Lucia. Now, the Romans went there. I'm not going to get into the history of why and what. No, that is not necessary for this stage. But for whatever grudge the Romans had, wanted to prove a point, they went to the kingdom of Lucia and completely, death and destruction again. Took out everybody. They just killed, murdered, slaughtered everybody. And renamed that place after themselves. So today, the kingdom of Dosia completely wiped out of the face of the earth. And its place, Romania. Isn't that incredible? Anyway, so these two books, the Iceman Inheritance and the ISIS Papers by Dr. Wesley, is great read. These are a bit depressing, so lightning a little bit. It's not all about non-fiction. There's a book of fiction here called Things Fall Apart, Chinua Achebe. I'm proud to be associated with this man because he's a Nigerian man. He wrote this book on life before the coming of the Europeans. He's an Igbo man, so he wrote it from the Igbo perspective, how they lived, how they conducted themselves in their societies. And it's a little book. You can read it in a weekend and see what it was like before the Europeans came, and things changed, sometimes for the good, sometimes disastrous, worse. So it's a great book, Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. Talking of books of fiction to lighten the mood, there's also a book here called Shifted Illusions by a certain Akpomiemie Erijaro. So you give that one a read and make of it what you will. That is also another great read. And before I wrap this all up now, I will introduce to you 3 books here. The H. Sylvester Williams, Josh Padmore, and C.L.R. James. These books here, the one by H. Sylvester Williams is called The Origin of Pan-African Movement. It gives you a history of the Pan-African movement from 1869 to 1911. A fantastic read, is what reading. And then the one of Josh Padmore his book is called Africa and World Peace. Fantastic read. The book by C.L.R. James is called A History of Pan-African Revolt, because it came a time where these Africans said, oh, no, we cannot go on with, because it's all about colonialism, this is just too much, we cannot just sit back and continue to swallow this, we have to do something. So these great Africans of the early days, they came together and gave birth to what we call Pan-Africanism today. The reason I did the first books on the shelf, the reason I put them here is because I wanted to pay homage to these 3 fantastic gentlemen, because believe it or not, Pan-Africanism did not start in Africa. No. It started all the way in Trinidad. Isn't that incredible? So these 3 gentlemen, they're all from Trinidad. They gave the word Pan-Africanism And until later on, the likes of Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Nkrumah of Ghana, Zik of Africa, of Nigeria, Zik of Nigeria, well, it was probably known as Zik of Africa, and the areas of this world, they took it up, and then from Pan-Africanism, we now have this Afrocentrism that is a blessing to the black man, to the African. So I thought I would just pay homage to these three gentlemen. Fantastic read. Please have a look at them. And finally, we have a book here called, well, it is, I painted this book in gold. There is no title, there is no name to this book. I did this for a reason. I wanted to pay homage to many of our scholars that have done, because I have not read all the books. And one great thing about study, reading, the more you dig, the more you study, one thing you come to realize is how little you know. Isn't that something? The more you find, the more you come to be aware that there's a lot more yet to know. So this is this book here, this golden book here, is dedicated to the likes of Richard Obengas of this world, Astra Kwesi's, James Smalls. Oh, James Small, I have to pause there because James Small, as far as I'm concerned, James Small is an American. My goodness, James Small is a living encyclopedia when it comes to world history, especially African history. So it is to all these fantastic ladies and gentlemen all over the world, in Africa, Europe, America, and the Caribbean, that have given us so much, that I dedicated this book to. So I hope with just these few collections I've presented to you today, you will be encouraged to look at some of all these titles, study them, and recommend to others to read. This is just volume 1. There are 2 volumes. Hopefully I will present volume 2 in the next few days. So if you've enjoyed this bit, by all means, please obviously the like, subscribe, and join us as we do volume 2 in the next coming days. So once again, it's been a great pleasure having you, and I hope to see you again. The name is ArtbyAkpomiemie. Thank you.